Hey guys, let's look at a few photos from a recent engagement shoot that I did and how I edit things to make them pop. Here are 9 of the images from this session. We'll start with this one of the couple dancing. First thing I like to do is adjust the tone curve to add some extra contrast. The tone curve changes the overall look of the image much more than just the contrast and exposure sliders. Next, we'll bring up the actual exposure and warm up the temperature. I usually like things being on the warmer side, but this is totally up to your own preference. Use the contrast slider to bring down a bit of the crunchiness and maybe add a little extra warmth. Lately, I've liked bringing the tint a little bit more towards green because I think it creates a little bit of an earthy tone. I'll still use the sliders for highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks, but I'll do these kind of as a secondary step after the tone curve. For colors, I like to start with calibration, add about 25 to the blue and green channels, a little bit to the red as well. Calibration seems to add a lot more pop to the colors than just using the HSL sliders. And if you want to add even more warmth to the shadows, you can go to color grading, bring the shadow setting slightly towards the orange color. I wouldn't overdo this though. To start with the HSL sliders, I like to start by adjusting the hue of the red and magenta, a little bit of the orange as well. Make them a little bit more of an orange color. I think this helps create more of that earthiness effect and reduces some of the pink tones from the skin. Next, if you want to adjust the yellow and green hues, they can drastically change the background of your scene, especially if you're in an outdoor setting like this. You can make the trees and the grass either a little bit more of a golden hour orange or bring them to a colder bluish green. Again, I like doing more of the warmer shades, but this is also totally your preference. We'll use the luminance sliders on the red and orange to make the skin tones pop out a little bit more. It's usually good to apply the lens corrections and play with the distortion and vignette to fit how you want the style to look. I'll reduce vibrance a little bit because I'm feeling like it's a bit oversaturated and I want things to look a little more natural. A big pet peeve of mine is when white clothing gets this bluish color when it's in the shade. This is mostly a white balance issue, so we can use the subject masking and then color range, invert that to quickly select the white shirt. It's good to use the refining slider to make sure that the correct area of the shirt is selected and you're not doing anything too far outside of that. And then I'll add some warmth and exposure. I'm also seeing that his face is a little bit dark for some reason, so let's create a quick radial mask and bring up the exposure. This image is looking pretty good, so let's copy these settings and bring them to another image. Right from the start, this one is a little too warm, so we'll bring down the temperature and also adjust the tone curve to reduce some contrast. We'll move this radial mask to the correct spot of his face and change the exposure and white balance to help his face match hers a little bit more. To finish this one, let's bring some contrast back by bringing down the dark areas of the tone curve and move on to another image. We'll paste these settings again and start by adjusting the hue and saturation sliders so that the skin tones look even and natural. We'll bring some extra contrast into the tone curve and play around with some subject masking to try affecting the overall scene. I like to use the subject select and then invert it to select the background. It's usually nice to drop the exposure of the background and help make the couple pop out more. We'll copy these settings of this image to save the new subject masks, and then we'll apply them to the next image. You can see how much it makes them really glow in this next shot. I also like to always look around for tiny distractions like this paper on the floor. Sometimes it'll be things like branches in the background or just things that kind of draw your attention away from what's important, and I'll try to clone them out pretty quickly. We'll end this video with this image of the couple underneath this pine tree since there's an extra thing I want to do here. I'll paste the new edits and masks and then start adjusting exposure and temperature to what feels right. I think the bottom half of this image feels almost too bright and a little too low contrast, makes everything look a little too flat. So we'll use a gradient mask to darken down the ground. This doesn't look too bad on its own, but sometimes I like to subtract subjects from this just to make sure that their legs don't get too underexposed. And then we'll add a little bit of a brush mask to his face again to help brighten it up. Here are some of the final results of these edits. I hope you guys really enjoyed watching this, and I hope you learned something. If you like these editing tutorials, please let me know in the comments because it'll help me know what you guys want to learn. And if you're in the New Jersey area and you need a wedding photographer, please feel free to reach out to me on my website. Thanks again.